Hello creative friends, it's Rhonda of Fruitful Life Studio, and I'm here in my studio in Central California on my orange farm. Today I'd like to show you my process for creating my textile collages that I put on tote bags, upcycled clothing, you name it, decor pillows. I've got 4 steps to my process. That includes machine sewing and slow stitch embroidery. My first step is to choose my focus fabric. I happened to finish another project and I had all the scraps and bits left over, so I chose a focus fabric that would coordinate with what I had already out from my stash. So now I'm trimming away the excess. I'm deciding how large I want this to be. Since this is a small focus fabric, I don't want to make the panel too large or the collage too large. I'm gluing it down with some washable glue. I pre-wash all my fabrics beforehand, but not necessarily my trims unless I feel like they're going to shrink a lot in the wash. I like to make my strips or borders by snipping and ripping. I just snip a little piece off the end in the width I like and then rip it. This creates long stringy threads, so later on after I sew, I snip the ends along the raw edge to cut down on those long frays. And this is my step 2. My layered borders. I audition them as I go, and if they just don't look right or a lot of attention to your eye is drawn to the border, it tells me it's taking the focus away from the art panel or the focus fabric, so I choose something else. Again, I'm using the washable glue stick to temporarily attach these to my art panel or collage. I can always pull them up and move them around or change my mind because the glue will all wash out in my final wash. Now that I have layered all my borders, I'm ready to add some vintage charm. I have this lace piece that I'm going to cut apart and use to frame out the top and the bottom of this collage. I like to use the glue called Sobo glue. It's for fabric. Unlike a lot of the other glues I've tried, this one does not seep through or bleed through. Some of the clear adhesives I've used often look like they were staining my fabric, and this one is more like a tacky glue. So if you have a craft glue or a tacky glue, you can substitute that as well. Let this glue dry completely before machine stitching, and try to apply it if you know you're going to be hand stitching in on top of the lace. Try not to apply the glue to areas where you know you're going to be hand stitching because it will make it more difficult to hand stitch through. The reason I use this glue for my cut laces is that it actually helps the ends stop fraying because I'm cutting through and exposing the raw threads, and so the glue will cut down on the fray. You'll notice I also try to bury the ends under the lace or the borders. After applying all my borders and trims, sometimes the fabric panel or collage looks a little imbalanced. So right here I'm finding the center, and I'm seeing that I have a lot more background fabric on the bottom half, so I'm just snipping and ripping a little bit just to create more of a balance. I changed my mind about the style of word I wanted to use, so it was easy to peel it off and reapply a little bit more washable glue and find something that suited me. Now we're on to step 3, machine sewing all these layers together. I have a lot of layers going here. I start usually with the ones that are overlapping other layers, so that I can tack down as much things as I need to at once. Just pick a layer and start sewing is what I would advise you to do. I have a machine that I can change the style of the stitch. So usually when I come to a new section or a new patch or border, I like to change the stitch just to make it look more like a slow stitched or a crazy quilt piece. But if you have an older machine, a zigzag stitch works just as well. If you have just a straight stitch machine, go around each border twice with maybe like 1/8 of an inch distance between your rows of stitching. This will help secure it more, and as you wash it, it's going to fray. So the second row of stitching with a straight stitch will help secure your borders. I like to snip away the threads as I go, just so they don't get in the way and drag anything or make anything pucker as I sew. I'm demonstrating on my travel machine. It's a purchase I made from Juki Junkies. I've actually purchased 4 machines from them now for different reasons and different purposes, and I'll be showing you these as I do different projects on this YouTube channel. They have the #1 customer service I've ever seen in a sewing machine company. I will put the link in the description. For my lace pieces, I use a zigzag stitch, and along the edges that have the cut ends, I use the zigzag stitch, but I use a narrower stitch, more like a satin stitch, just to hold those ends down so that it will reduce the fraying. When you're sewing multiple layers like this or very delicate pieces, you'll want a stiletto to help you hold down the edges as you sew them together. When changing direction or path of your sewing, make sure you have the needle down into the fabric before you lift up the presser foot to pivot your fabric. Step 4 is my favorite. Using hand stitching, also called slow stitching, with embroidery thread or pearl cotton and an embroidery needle to secure your buttons, your charms, but mostly to add texture and design. I start off with adding some whip stitching to my text, my little piece word. I have a video. My last video was all about whip stitching, so you might want to go back and revisit that. In that video, I share my top 12 tips for beginners when slow stitching or hand stitching. Now I'm going to do a simple running stitch on my rickrack. It's like an angled running stitch, and I'm using the pattern of the rickrack to make one stitch on each side as it zigzags. Here I'm using the slow stitch method, where you do one stitch at a time, poke the needle down through the fabric, back up one at a time. I like taking these little projects along when I am traveling so that I am not on technology or my phone when I have some downtime. If you're in a bit of hurry to finish a project, like I usually am, I come in from the top and out from the top. It just saves a little bit of time making that complete stitch in and out from the top. To finish my hand stitching, I move the needle to the back and then I secure it with 2 slip knots, which is poking your needle through a little bit of the fabric, and then before you pull your stitch closed, you put the needle through that little loop and make a knot. Then on my 3rd stitch, I usually come out at a different location, burying my stitch and then snipping it or trimming it. I found a vintage or vintage look button, so I decided to use it at the top of my piece. I double my thread for that purpose. I usually use a double thread pearl cotton size 8 just because it gives a bolder look. But if you're using the traditional 6-strand embroidery floss, you can always separate it into a thinner piece of thread. I like mine bold. I like my stitching bold and very visible, as in visible mending. After securing the button, at least 3 passes through the holes or the shank of the button. I use a double slip knot on the back and then bury my end and trim it. I don't worry too much about the back of my collages because this whole collage will be applied to something else, a garment, a tote bag, a pillow, whatever I decide on. It could also be a piece of framed art. Now I'm using the Lazy Daisy stitch to accent that piece on the top, that lace piece on the top, just to make it look bold, to draw more attention to the detail. If you've never done a Lazy Daisy stitch, you can always Google it or search it on YouTube. There's plenty of videos teaching embroidery for beginners. Again, this is the Lazy Daisy stitch. Here's the back view of my art collage, and you can see the variety of stitching that I used. Thank you for watching today. If you were inspired by this video, I really appreciate your likes or comments. That helps other creatives see my videos and my content. And check out my fabric panels on my website, fruitfullifestudio.com.